The long-awaited release of Into the Emerald Dream has arrived, and we didn't get what we wanted. The magical transformation of Hearthstone into a game committed to classic design principles did not happen. We saw some important shifts, but they were overshadowed by new toxic meta-dominant decks. For me, this expansion launch is one of the worst in 11 years, and the reason isn't Armor Demon Hunter, but rather the developers' attempt to merge modern design philosophies with an overall power level reduction. The problem is that the current design logic differs significantly from what we saw 4 years ago and does not blend well with more balanced cards.
Time to rock and roll!
Hello my friends. My name is Bot Mathematician and this is Holomancer.
Also, Chief Investigative Reporter Dora joined us this evening.
Gadgets and Gazette always gets the scoop.
Typically, at this stage we discuss the best packs, craft-worthy cards or the most efficient decks.
But this time, that discussion feels utterly pointless. We strongly advise against buying new packs or making significant investments in crafting new cards, as their impact on the meta is rapidly diminishing.
Into the Emerald Dream is an extremely interesting set, but its overall utility is remarkably low due to an unprepared game environment.
But before we begin, we want to welcome our newest patron.
Dan Magny II, we sincerely appreciate your support, it means a lot. Also, a big thank you to every viewer for your likes, notifications, and subscriptions to the channel.
Alright guys, let's get started. Rotation is the most significant period of the game year, driving peak player interest and converting into record revenue for Blizzard. Traditionally, our audience spends the most time in the game during the first phase of a new expansion when everything feels as fresh as possible.
This is a key period for the game, creating huge potential. Unfortunately, we must acknowledge that the Hearthstone team failed to capitalize on it.
The Hearthstone community had high hopes for sweeping changes. Rotation, the release of new cards, and a massive pre-expansion balance patch all gave the impression that the developers were preparing to return to a more classic design philosophy. But reality was ruthless. Nothing extraordinary happened. Hearthstone remained Hearthstone. However, many players felt a massive gap between their expectations and the new gameplay experience.
We polled our audience about their initial impressions, and according to the results, overall player satisfaction has declined once again, now comparable to Perils in Paradise, which many of our viewers considered one of the worst expansions in Hearthstone's history. Once again, the audience split evenly into two camps, somewhat satisfied and dissatisfied. This has become a standard occurrence in modern Hearthstone. Wild chaotic decks appeal to one half of players while being completely unacceptable to the other.
According to Deck Tracker statistics, we are already seeing signs of declining player activity just days after the expansion's release, and the expected surge in legend-ranked players has yet to materialize.
Currently, players are pinning their hopes on an upcoming balance patch. However, if you take a closer look at our audience's satisfaction levels, an interesting pattern emerges. Over the past 9 months, balance patches have failed to reverse negative trends, particularly in post-release periods. Perhaps this time the developers will break that pattern, but it is concerning that they ignored the opportunity to ban the biggest fun killer and took so long to announce the upcoming nerfs. Additionally, if the team is truly focused on reducing power levels, we can expect widespread nerfs as well as a few targeted buffs instead of widespread card improvements.
Personally, I consider this expansion the worst, not because of dominant toxic strategies, but due to the massive gap between player expectations and reality, as well as the developers' extremely passive response. All of this has led to overwhelming frustration for me.
In my opinion, the current situation is more complex than it appears. Despite the supposed power level reduction, it feels like the team is unwilling to abandon modern design approaches. Let's try to determine the developer's original intent by analyzing the most popular decks.
But first, let's briefly describe the current situation. Following the rotation in the new expansion's release, the foundation of the new meta took shape almost immediately, and it happened far too quickly. Armor Demon Hunter became the dominant force within hours, soon followed by Suck Death Knight and a wave of new imbue strategies. Players eagerly experimented with fresh control archetypes that shared a common structure, weak early game presence and overwhelming late game effects. Initially, everything seemed intriguing and fun, but the rapid rise of Armor Demon Hunter quickly soured the experience. The most frustrating part was that the deck had virtually no weaknesses compared to other new strategies. This led to an accelerated meta evolution and a shift toward more aggressive decks from previous expansions, which were better equipped to counter the new leader. In other words, instead of exploring new playstyles, which is usually the most exciting part of a post-release period, players were forced to focus on countering a single dominant strategy. Additionally, this aggressive meta shift crushed many experimental archetypes before they had a chance to establish themselves. As a result, the experimentation phase lasted only a few days, whereas in the past, it could extend beyond a week. Now, the most effective decks are mostly aggressive or tempo-based archetypes from the Heroes of StarCraft miniset, along with a few new combo decks. The constant evolution of the meta has nearly stopped, proving that the game environment wasn't adequately prepared for the expansion's release. Armor Demon Hunter remains the most popular deck in Standard, though its impact significantly diminishes at higher ranks. The title of the best deck is currently shared between Zerg Egg Hunter and Location Warlock. Zerg Egg Hunter is superior to almost every strategy except for Location Warlock and Suck Death Knight. It is a highly aggressive deck further strengthened by Amphibian Spirit, the only new card it adopted. At its core, it's a classic aggro deck with insane tempo and a linear game plan, capable of closing out games in the early turns. Its win rate on the climb to Legend exceeds 60%, based on 5,000 recorded matches. Location Warlock has gained massive popularity. However, since it only incorporated one new card, it doesn't feel fresh. The deck excels at countering early aggression and generates an absurd amount of value in the mid-game, making it vastly superior to newer archetypes.
It's not a catastrophe when a specific synergy gets out of control post-release, or when older decks continue to dominate. Developers can't predict every interaction and potential combo, especially with the ever-growing card pool. However, Armor Demon Hunter not only ruined first impressions but also accelerated the inevitable return and dominance of StarCraft archetypes. Personally, I have never spent so little time in Hearthstone during a post-release period. I find the design logic behind Armor Demon Hunter fascinating because it wasn't an accidental discovery of a broken interaction. It was intentionally designed this way.
For me, this solidifies my belief that the developers have no clear direction for this class. The new archetype feels like a hybrid of various mechanics from other classes thrown together.
Moreover, we once again received a highly toxic strategy. The developers seem to either create nearly unplayable or simply uninteresting archetypes, or completely broken ones. A year ago, Shopper Demon Hunter terrorized the meta during this same period, and now Armor Demon Hunter is doing the same. Both decks, in our opinion, suffer from terrible design.
Shopper Demon Hunter was only strong when it managed to discover and discount Magtheridon, preventing opponents from establishing board presence. The card itself was originally designed just to fill the demon pool for discover effects. This mechanic was meant to act as a balancing factor by limiting the chance of finding specific cards, but the odds were still high enough to create frequent auto-win scenarios.
Armor Demon Hunter is even stronger while being far less interesting from a design perspective. To understand the differences in approach, we need to briefly revisit the origins of Deathrittle Demon Hunter in 2021, during the Forged in the Barrens expansion.
This strategy was based on Quillboar's synergy of summoning cards of a specific cost from your hand or deck upon their death. To maximize value, players had to include a wide range of Deathrattle minions costing 3 and 4 mana in their deck building process, increasing the chances of having them in hand. Additionally, they would separately include 5 mana minions, which could be summoned from the deck through the effect of the legendary Death Speaker Blackthorn. The trick was that the effect's wording didn't guarantee summoning specific high-cost cards. More often than not, it would summon cards with a variety of costs ranging from 2 to 5 mana. This was the main factor that prevented the archetype from becoming a full-fledged combo deck. In this case, controlled randomness served as a natural balancing mechanism. I really loved this strategy, and it was probably the last time I played Demon Hunter so actively. The deck wasn't particularly effective at launch and even required a bit of a boost to gain momentum. The situation with Armor Demon Hunter is entirely different. Despite the fact that the new cards' descriptions almost perfectly match the old ones, their mechanics function differently. Unlike summoning a card from your hand, resurrection mechanics eliminate the need for a broad range of diverse cards, allowing the deck to be built around abusing just one key minion. The problem is further exacerbated by the fact that Ferocious Fellbat is specifically designed to consistently resurrect Ravenous Fellhunter, amplifying the influence of a single card. For example, in 2021, the wording of Ferocious Fellbat could have been, resurrect a different friendly Deathrattle minion that costs 5 or less. Simply changing more to less would have introduced a random factor that balanced the deck's power, though it wouldn't have necessarily improved the deck's design. The core concept of Armor Demon Hunter creates completely predictable outcomes, where you always know exactly which card will be resurrected.
Armor Demon Hunter was initially designed as a combo deck that revolves around abusing a single Deathrattle effect. It's hard to believe the developers overlooked its synergy with Arcanite Defense Crystal, especially considering how many unexpected interactions that card has had in the past. For reasons unknown to us, the design team saw this archetype as fun and believed it should be a part of the meta.
Arcanite Defense Crystal represents an important design trend that completely disappeared in the Heroes of StarCraft mini-set but made a return and into the Emerald Dream.
Modern Hearthstone has a framework that allows for isolated components of a synergy to be extracted and exploited in entirely different, unexpected scenarios. This is often a great feature. Finding alternative uses for a card can be exciting. However, in this case, the alternative application is simply too powerful and dominant.
Among the new meta-defining decks, there are also some positive design changes worth discussing. The Suck synergy consists of only 3 new cards, but even that was enough to shake up the meta after release. Summon leeches and drain your opponent's health, transferring it to yourself. The centerpiece of this synergy is Hideous Husk, which enhances the effect of health-stealing mechanics. Various deck builds attempt to incorporate this synergy as a secondary win condition, but fortunately, the presence of blood runes limits its use cases. When used in combination with other cards, this mechanic is essentially a rework of the Azerite Snake, a legendary card that was an overpowered finisher, causing major balance issues. Its dominance eventually led to a cascade of nerfs that ultimately killed the card. The design team learned from past mistakes and reintroduced this mechanic in a new form, with several important refinements. First, you no longer need to go through an entire sequence of actions to access the effect. The mechanic is now less linear, functioning through the summoning of leeches, which collectively generate a comparable health steal effect. Essentially, the developers deconstructed the overpowered card from the past and rebuilt it as a fully fleshed-out synergy. The absence of a battle cry prevents the effect from being multiplied within a single turn, yet its prolonged activation allows it to be triggered over multiple turns. Most importantly, using this synergy as a finisher has become significantly harder since leeches now target the opponent with the lowest health. Is this synergy strong? Absolutely, especially considering that the developers aim to lower the power level of new cards. But is it broken compared to Azerite Snake? Definitely not. Opponents now have significantly more ways to counter this strategy. At the very least, a wide board of large minions can prevent leeches from reaching your health pool.
But there's one important nuance. This implementation marks yet another return of turnaround mechanics to the game. Essentially, you negate your opponent's board advantage, create an immediate threat that cannot be ignored, and simultaneously extract massive value. This was the core feature of the Titans. Personally, I'm completely exhausted by the turnaround effects. I'd prefer Hearthstone without them, but I have to acknowledge that many players love these mechanics, and while this particular implementation is extremely powerful, it's far from the worst we've seen.
Another defining feature of the current meta is the dominance of combo decks that heavily rely on goldfishing. In other words, drawing the right cards at the right time or assembling a specific combination. Such decks have always existed, but they were usually niche, fun strategies with low win rates. Now, they have become too strong and too popular. For example, Nebula Shaman is built around old mechanics and has nothing to do with the new design philosophy, yet it has thrived due to the reduced prevalence of turnaround mechanics. The deck has incorporated just one new card, but it has significantly enhanced the effectiveness of the combination. Play a 4-card combo on turn 7, and you'll have a full board of 8 mana minions. Even if your opponent finds an answer, you'll just fill the board again. This deck is incredibly frustrating and toxic to play against.
Unlike Nebula Shaman, Food Fight Warrior is a direct result of Into the Emerald Dream's design philosophy. The Food Fight spell has long been waiting for a proper abuse enabler, and Briarspawn Drake, ripped from the Dragon Synergy ecosystem along with a few other support cards, fits that role perfectly. For a goldfish scenario, all you need is Food Fight and ways to destroy Entree. The remaining Dragon Synergy pieces only amplify the power of the combo. The existence of this interaction makes the traditional wide-range Dragon Synergy completely obsolete.
Like Armor Demon Hunter, this deck follows the same underlying logic, allowing players to abuse a single key minion effect through repeated resurrections, creating an extremely toxic gameplay pattern. Additionally, Dunga Druid has resurfaced in the meta. It's not as dominant or effective as before, but it still remains a part of the competitive landscape. Holy Katoon, I'm so tired of this archetype.
When these decks goldfish correctly, they gain massive, often insurmountable advantages, especially in a meta with fewer turnaround effects or powerful board clears. And that's incredibly frustrating. On the other hand, when they fail to draw key cards, they lose too easily, making gameplay feel dull and unengaging. But the biggest issue is the sheer concentration of these decks. Encountering them repeatedly makes the experience feel increasingly toxic.
Of course, the decks I've mentioned don't fully encapsulate the design philosophy of this expansion. The game has undeniably shifted toward a more board-centric playstyle. The reduced prevalence of turnaround mechanics has been a huge positive for gameplay. Most new archetypes are much better balanced and align more closely with classic design principles. The new strategies are engaging, but all these positives are undermined by the lack of space for fresh strategies to emerge. Into the Emerald Dream and the Great Dark Beyond are fantastic expansions, but they don't integrate well with the modern game's design philosophy.
The Hearthstone team's primary goal is to offer the widest possible variety of ways to play. It's an amusement park, where every player can find a ride that suits their taste, and among them, there will always be something chaotic and wild.
This is an amazing concept, on paper. But in reality, with so many cards in the pool, maintaining a delicate balance between traditional gameplay and absurdly broken decks is nearly impossible. As a result, time and time again, the most outrageous decks spiral out of control.
Even after rotation, mass nerfs, and the release of an expansion with a lower overall power level, we're still seeing the same insane, modern Hearthstone, filled with wacky, over-the-top combo effects. The dev team is trying to merge two opposing ideas, reducing overall power levels while maintaining their current approach to game design.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not a hater of modern Hearthstone design. There are many advantages to the current philosophy compared to the classic approach, but lately, I've felt completely exhausted by the sheer craziness of it all. I crave an alternative style of gameplay for variety's sake, but for a long time now, I haven't had that opportunity. As a result, I find myself spending less and less time in the game.
Dear friends, while we were preparing this video for release, the Hearthstone team had already published a list of nerfs and buffs. I'm surprised, but every deck with toxic gameplay that we discussed today is getting nerfed. This will undoubtedly weaken the current favorites, but do you believe this will create the perfect conditions for Into the Emerald Dream to truly shine? Or will these balance changes lay the groundwork for even more insane strategies built around old cards?
Let us know your thoughts below and join the polls in your community tab. Remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to support our content and stay updated.
Traditionally, we want to express our boundless gratitude to our sponsors.
Dear friends, your help is invaluable. We will be grateful for any support.
Okay, that's all for today. Thank you for spending this time with us. We really hope that we will have the opportunity to get in touch in the next video.
Take care of yourself.
And never give up.
Job's done.